Hello, my name is Jeremy, and this is the True Crime Chronicles channel. In Charleston, South Carolina, in 1989, 24-year-old Annie Tahan, a young mother, mysteriously disappeared. According to her partner, she suddenly abandoned him and their newborn daughter without explaining her departure. The search for Annie stretched over 4 years. Attempts to locate the missing woman continued with no immediate results. Annie Tahan, born on May 1, 1965, grew up under the care of her mother. She had a zest for life, enjoying dancing, fun, and cherishing simple joys. Annie harbored the dream of a large family, viewing motherhood as her primary aspiration. She embraced this role early, giving birth to her first son, Jamie, at 18, followed by her second son, Sean, just a year later. By the age of 20, she welcomed her third child, a daughter named Shane. Tragically, soon after Shane's birth, the children's father left Annie, choosing not to be involved in their upbringing and effectively abandoning the family. This left Annie to face the challenges of single parenthood, managing a household with 3 young children while living in a rented apartment in Maine. In 1987, when her youngest daughter Shane was just 6 months old, 22-year-old Annie encountered a new chapter in her life. She met 32-year-old Michael Palin, a Navy petty officer on the aircraft carrier Bramby. Their paths crossed in Portland, Maine, where Michael's ship was docked and he was drawn to Annie during a waterfront encounter. Residing in Charleston, South Carolina, Michael was a respected member of the Navy, known for his work as a computer systems operator. He was actively involved in military operations and had been honored with several awards. Annie was captivated by Michael's naval career and quickly fell in love, confiding to a friend that she had found a man she deemed worthy of her love. After dating for a few months, Annie and Michael decided to move in together, creating a family unit with her 2 sons and daughter. However, their shared life took a tragic turn when a fire broke out in their apartment. At that time, Annie was out, leaving Michael at home with the children. Michael, along with Jamie and Sean, managed to escape, but Shane, too young to walk, was tragically left behind. Upon returning, Annie attempted to enter the burning apartment to save Shane but was restrained by neighbors. The loss of Shane in the fire left an indelible mark on Annie, who expressed that the tragedy had created an irreplaceable void in her heart. As the authorities delved into investigating the fire incident, the experts faced challenges in pinpointing the exact cause of the ignition. The circumstances surrounding the fire were deemed highly suspicious by the investigators. Despite these suspicions, the investigation concluded without assigning responsibility to any individual. In the wake of the devastating fire, Annie Tahan, along with her sons, relocated to her mother's private residence in Portland. Meanwhile, Michael Palin devoted himself to his work, choosing to reside in the barracks. A few months following this move, another alarming incident occurred near Annie's mother's house. A shed in the backyard was set ablaze. The investigators were quick to identify the fire's origin, discovering a lighter engraved with Bramby, the name of the ship where Michael Palin served. This discovery placed Michael at the forefront as the prime suspect in the arson case. Despite the suggestive evidence, the police were unable to conclusively prove his involvement, hindered by a lack of definitive proof. Following the second fire incident, child welfare authorities in Maine determined that Annie Tahan's sons were in a potentially hazardous situation under her care. Consequently, they made the difficult decision to remove Jamie and Sean from their mother's custody, placing them under the foster care system administered by the Department of Social Services. This decision left Annie in a state of despair, as she fervently attempted to regain custody of her children. Despite her best efforts, she was unable to do so, and the situation inflicted profound emotional distress, leaving her heartbroken over being separated from her sons. As Michael's ship returned to Charleston, South Carolina, he settled into a rented apartment and renewed his connection with Annie. Despite their tumultuous past, Annie agreed to communicate with him and eventually moved in with him to Goose Creek, a suburb of Charleston, where they lived as a couple. However, Annie's stay was soon marred by a startling discovery. She found a photograph of Michael wearing a wedding ring, revealing his marital status. Confronted with the photograph, Michael admitted to Annie that he was married but had been long divorced. He disclosed that his ex-wife, Dawn Breeze, and their 3 children resided in his mother's house in Savannah, Georgia. Despite Michael's reassurances of no ongoing relationship with Dawn, Annie was shaken by the revelation. She contemplated leaving him, but ultimately decided to stay, still seeing Michael as an ideal partner for starting a family. Their cohabitation, however, soon turned sour. Michael's behavior towards Annie grew increasingly hostile and demeaning. Annie, planning to return to her mother's house, discovered she was pregnant. This news led her to reassess her plans to leave, filled with the joy of expecting another child. In October 1989, a month before her disappearance, Annie gave birth to her fourth daughter, Jade. Though Annie knew Jade could never replace her lost daughter, she felt Jade filled a significant void in her heart. Yet, in the month following Jade's birth, Michael's treatment of Annie deteriorated further. He resorted to openly insulting and humiliating her. Annie confided in a friend about her fear of Michael's relentless pursuit if she attempted to flee. Michael's controlling behavior escalated. He confined Annie to their apartment while he was at work, disconnecting the phone, placing it in his briefcase, and taking it with him. Annie was increasingly alarmed by Michael's behavior. Merely 2 days before her vanishing, Annie, in a state of distress, reached out to her close friend Katie French via phone call. In the call, Annie revealed to Katie that she had disclosed her intention to leave Michael. However, Michael had retorted that if she left, their daughter Jade would remain with him, and Annie would be barred from seeing her again. Overwhelmed with emotion, Annie sobbed and pleaded with Katie to come immediately to rescue both her and Jade. Regrettably, Katie was preoccupied and unable to come to her aid. Instead, she sent Annie money to purchase a bus ticket, hoping it would enable her to flee and return to her native Portland. This heartfelt and urgent conversation unknowingly became the last exchange between the two friends. 2 days following their last conversation, on November 7, 1989, Katie French attempted to contact Annie but received no response. Several days later, Michael Palin reached out to Katie, informing her that on November 6th, Annie had gathered her belongings and departed in an unspecified direction. Expecting Annie to contact her from her new location, Katie waited anxiously, but 2 weeks elapsed with no word. By Thanksgiving on November 24th, Annie had been unreachable for a total of 20 days. Growing increasingly concerned, Katie reached out to all of Annie's friends and acquaintances, only to find that no one had any information. She then attempted to report 24-year-old Annie Tahan as missing to the police, but was informed that as she was not a blood relative, she could not officially file a report. As months passed with no sign of Annie, Katie eventually obtained the phone number of Michael Palin's mother. Upon contacting her, Katie was shocked to learn that Annie's youngest daughter, Jade, was in her care. This revelation solidified Katie's worst fears. She was certain that Annie would never voluntarily leave her daughter behind. Not long after the concerning developments, Michael Palin received a transfer to the naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Despite the mysterious circumstances surrounding the mother of his daughter, he displayed a notable lack of concern regarding her whereabouts. Michael made no evident efforts to engage with the authorities or to initiate a search for Annie. Months following Annie Tahan's disappearance, the search for her was officially launched, instigated by a report from her mother. The initial focus of the investigation was her live-in partner, Michael Palin, who quickly emerged as the primary suspect. Michael detailed that on the morning of November 6th, he had woken to find Annie gone, having left their daughter in his care. He recounted that the previous night, Annie had expressed a wish to end their relationship. Michael did not attempt to find Annie, believing that their relationship had conclusively ended and that further communication was unnecessary. He also claimed to be unaware of her being reported missing or of her lack of contact with family and friends. Upon inspecting the couple's rented apartment, police found no evidence, such as traces, clues, or suspicious items, that could provide leads in the case. Annie Tahan's case seemed to have hit a dead end, with no large-scale search being initiated for the young woman. Her whereabouts, whether she was still alive, and the potential motives of any abductor remained mysteries. The only certain detail was that the last person reported to have seen her was her live-in partner, Michael. For an arduous span of 4 years, there was no news or sightings of Annie. Katie French, her close friend, remained the sole active seeker, tirelessly cooperating with the investigation. Katie invested approximately $16,000 in phone bills alone, employed a private detective, and was steadfast in her determination to continue the search. She reached out to various organizations that could potentially provide insight into Michael Palin's background. Katie personally held a strong belief that Michael was a dangerous individual and should not be trusted. She harbored a deep fear of him, aware that if Michael became aware of her involvement with the police, it could potentially put her in harm's way. In 1993, a significant development occurred in Annie Tahan's case as it was transferred to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS, marking a pivotal shift in the investigation. The NCIS agents initiated a comprehensive re-examination of the case, starting from the ground up. They located Michael Palin stationed at the naval base Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. When Marine police agents approached him to discuss Annie Tahan's disappearance, Michael indicated his willingness to talk only in the presence of his attorney. Subsequently, he entirely withdrew from any cooperation with the investigation, refusing to provide further assistance or information. The Marine police agents compiled all available information regarding the missing Annie and reached out to the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. They requested the division to cross-reference their data with any unidentified bodies, highlighting that Annie had recently given birth a month before her disappearance. The South Carolina police reported a case involving a deceased woman who, coincidentally, had also given birth a month before her death. They provided a sketch of the woman's appearance, which left the Marine police agents stunned upon viewing it. They were convinced that they had found Annie Tahan. The discovery revealed a brutal murder, with her body located beside a highway in Jasper County, South Carolina, approximately 100 miles from her residence with Michael. The crime scene photos were distressing, displaying a level of brutality that the agents admitted they had seldom encountered. Annie's facial structure was severely compressed, and her skull was shattered into 124 fragments, necessitating nearly 500 hours of painstaking reconstruction work. It was discovered that Annie's body had been placed in a naval bag, soaked in gasoline, and set ablaze. The burning bag was discovered at 6 a.m. on November 7, 1989, coinciding with the period when Katie French noted Annie had ceased responding to her calls. A conclusive identification was made by matching the dental records of Annie Tahan with those of the unidentified woman. Following the discovery of Annie Tahan's body, Michael Palin was immediately identified as the prime suspect in her murder. The Marine police agents formulated a comprehensive investigation strategy, beginning with an examination of his financial activities. They uncovered that on the day Annie disappeared, Michael had made a credit card transaction approximately 25 miles south of where the charred remains were discovered. Further scrutiny of his phone records revealed that on the morning of November 6th, he made 2 calls to his mother's house in Savannah, the first at 4:35 a.m. and the second at 5:17 a.m. Based on these findings, the agents hypothesized that Michael had murdered Annie in their apartment and subsequently transported and abandoned her body at the roadside, where he then set it ablaze. The NCIS agents, determined to progress in their investigation, sought to locate Michael Palin's ex-wife, Dawn Breeze. At the time of Annie's death, Dawn was still legally married to Michael, residing in his mother's house in Savannah. Following Annie's disappearance, Dawn divorced Michael and had since been living in various states, frequently changing her residences as though evading someone or something. The agents eventually discovered she was living in Miami, Florida. In the summer of 1995, almost 6 years after Annie Tahan's murder, they located Dawn, who had become involved in spiritual practices as a source of income. When the agents visited Dawn at her workplace to discuss Annie Tahan's disappearance, her response was unexpectedly calm. She inquired about the length of the conversation, expressing her desire to eat if it would be extended. This reaction surprised the agents, who had anticipated a more emotional response to the mention of Annie. Nonetheless, Dawn remained composed throughout their interaction. During a 10-hour interrogation, Dawn's account initially aligned with Michael Palin's narrative. She stated that upon visiting Michael's apartment, he informed her of his mistress's departure and his intent to raise their daughter alone. However, inconsistencies emerged regarding the timeline of her visit to Michael's apartment. At one point, Dawn fell silent, looked down, and expressed a desire to reveal the truth. Her ensuing monologue was devoid of emotion, lacking any tears, as she disclosed what she had withheld for 6 years. Dawn revealed that early one morning, Michael had urgently summoned her to his Charleston apartment. There, she discovered Annie Tahan's lifeless body on the living room floor. Michael instructed Dawn to go to the bedroom to meet his daughter. At that time, Dawn and Michael were still legally married and shared 3 children. Michael confessed his affair with Annie to Dawn, explaining it had led to the birth of a daughter. He pleaded with her to accept the child and assist him in raising her. Dawn indicated that Michael, unwilling to engage in a custody battle with Annie, had opted for murder as a more straightforward solution. On the night transitioning from November 5 to 6, 1989, Michael and Annie went to bed, and after a moment of intimacy, Annie fell asleep. It was then that Michael took a crowbar and began to viciously strike her. Tragically, their daughter Jade was lying next to Annie on the bed throughout this horrific act. Michael relentlessly hit Annie on the head, each blow more brutal than the last. Despite her strength, Annie eventually succumbed to her injuries right there in the bed. In a chilling turn of events, Michael reached out to his wife, Dawn, requesting her urgent presence. He then placed Annie's body in a naval bag and transferred it to the trunk of his car, where he had also stored a canister of gasoline. He positioned both his wife and daughter in the car's back seat, embarking on a lengthy drive of approximately 100 miles. Upon finding a secluded spot by the roadside, Michael removed Annie's body from the trunk, drenched it in gasoline, and set it ablaze. After ensuring the fire had taken hold, he hurriedly returned to the car and drove Dawn and Jade back to his mother's house in Savannah. Dawn Breeze's revelation provided a pivotal turn in the investigation, marking the first substantial evidence since the discovery of Annie's remains. The investigators then requested Dawn to make a monitored phone call to her ex-husband, Michael, and discuss Annie Tahan's murder. Dawn consented and contacted Michael, indicating her need for a serious conversation as Annie's body had been located and identified. Michael's response, "No, they didn't do that," subtly confirmed to the agents the veracity of Dawn's account. In the call, Dawn also informed Michael that blood had been detected in their former apartment, and the NCIS was suspecting them of involvement in the murder. She urged Michael to devise an explanation for the blood found in the apartment. Michael's reply, "Okay, we need to work together and come up with something," did not include any direct admissions, yet his demeanor suggested a clear understanding of the context of their discussion. He refrained from asking superfluous questions or offering denials, implicating his awareness of the situation. This interaction solidified the theory that Annie Tahan had been murdered in Michael's apartment. Towards the end of their conversation, Michael advised Dawn to be cautious with her phone communications, insisting they would collaboratively manage the situation. The NCIS agents took Dawn Breeze to the crime scene to unearth any remaining evidence. To protect her identity and ensure her safety as a cooperating witness, they disguised her before the visit. At the apartment, Dawn meticulously recounted and demonstrated the positioning of Annie's body and the sequence of events. She pointed out an area near a wall and baseboard where there had been a significant accumulation of blood, affecting the carpet and the concrete floor beneath it. Since Michael had vacated the apartment, the landlords had replaced and cleaned the carpets multiple times, explaining the absence of visible traces. However, when the police applied a special chemical to the concrete floor, a large purple stain appeared, indicative of protein presence, aligning with Dawn's account of where Annie's body had lain. Despite the blood seeping into the concrete, the NCIS faced challenges in conclusively proving the substance to be blood. Consequently, the search for additional physical evidence continued. Dawn also mentioned a nightstand with a television near the bed where Annie was killed. According to her, the television had been splattered with blood during the murder, and Michael had mentioned its need for extensive cleaning due to the stains. He later disposed of the television, possibly selling it rather than discarding a functional appliance, given his frugal nature. Locating this television was akin to finding a needle in a haystack, yet the agents were resolute in their efforts to find it. At this juncture, Michael Palin had grown cognizant of the NCIS's surveillance, particularly following the phone conversation with his ex-wife, Dawn. This realization triggered a sense of paranoia in him, and he soon became acutely aware of the monitoring activities. The NCIS agents harbored concerns that Michael might attempt to flee, coerce witnesses, or potentially inflict harm upon others. In a dramatic turn of events, during one of the surveillance missions, Michael tried to elude the authorities. However, his attempt was unsuccessful, as the police swiftly caught up with him. Consequently, on October 11, 1995, Michael Palin was apprehended and taken into custody. While Michael Palin was held in a military prison under suspicion of murder, NCIS agents diligently worked to locate and interview all the residents of the apartment complex where the murder took place back in November 1989. Their perseverance paid off 3 months later when they encountered a neighbor who disclosed that he had purchased a television from Michael. Remarkably, the television was still operational and present in his home. The police promptly seized the television and dispatched it to the FBI laboratory for a thorough forensic analysis. To their significant breakthrough, the examination revealed 11 blood spots inside the speaker. These blood samples were subsequently identified as matching Annie Tahan's DNA, providing a critical piece of evidence in the ongoing murder investigation. At this stage of the case, Michael Palin's legal representatives announced his willingness to enter a guilty plea, contingent upon the death penalty being set aside. Although the prosecutor was dissatisfied with this turn of events, military law stipulated that such an agreement should be facilitated. During the trial, Michael Palin acknowledged his culpability without displaying significant emotion, recounting the details of his crime with an unsettling detachment akin to reading a mundane list. His narrative was devoid of any signs of remorse or empathy. Consequently, Michael Palin was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment with eligibility for parole after 30 years. Additionally, he received a dishonorable discharge from the Navy. Despite her awareness of her husband's crime and her prolonged silence over 6 years, Dawn Breeze avoided legal repercussions due to her pivotal confession to the NCIS, which played a crucial role in advancing the investigation. Annie's children, her sons and daughter, have been made aware of the tragic fate that befell their biological mother. They understand that they were not abandoned by her. Jade, the daughter Annie shared with Michael, has grown into a beautiful woman. Raised within the Palin family, she has notably maintained no relationship with her father, Michael Palin. In a surprising turn of events, Michael Palin was released from prison in 2013 after serving only 17 years, reportedly due to good behavior. Currently, his exact location remains unknown, and it is advised that anyone who may come into contact with him should exercise caution. If you found this story interesting, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, don't forget to write your opinion in the comments. This was Jeremy. See you in the next video.